More and more country singers, both legends and rising stars, are quietly stepping away from fame to live off the grid. From remote cabins in Appalachia to cattle ranches in Montana, these artists have traded tour buses for tractors. Randy Travis was once a dominant force in country music. In the 1980s and 1990s, his deep voice and neo-traditional sound brought country music back to its roots. Songs like Forever and Ever, Amen, Three Wooden Crosses, and Deeper Than the Holler made him a household name. But in recent years, Randy has quietly vanished from the public eye. After a devastating stroke in 2013 left him with limited speech and mobility, Travis retreated from the spotlight, and many fans were left wondering where he went. Today, Randy Travis lives a much quieter life off the grid, with his wife Mary Davis in a rural area of Texas. The couple rarely grants interviews, and when they do, they focus on faith, healing, and the slow pace of country living. Far from the fast life of Nashville or Hollywood, Randy finds peace in the simplicity of the land around him. He's no longer chasing charts or tours. He's chasing sunsets, tending to horses, and finding joy in small things. His home is not open to the public. In fact, it's nestled behind gated farmland, shielded by trees, and surrounded by the kind of stillness that only a man who's seen too much noise can truly appreciate. Mary has been his caretaker and closest confidant through it all. The two are known to host close friends on their land for bonfires or barbecues, but for the most part, Randy keeps to himself. There's no social media frenzy, no camera crews, and certainly no touring schedule. Though he's made surprise appearances at events like the Grand Ole Opry, these moments are rare, and all the more special because of it. Randy Travis may no longer sing as he once did, but his voice, his legacy, continues to echo through every artist he inspired. And now, tucked away on his private patch of Texas soil, he's writing a quieter final chapter, one not filled with encores and flashing lights, but with faith, family, and healing. Jaime Johnson was never your average country star. From the very beginning, he defied Nashville's cookie-cutter formulas with his rich baritone, gritty songwriting, and refusal to play by industry rules. His breakout album, That Lonesome Song, and its follow-up, The Guitar Song, were hailed as masterpieces. Songs like In Color earned him Grammy nominations, while his outlaw attitude earned him comparisons to legends like Waylon Jennings and Merle Haggard. But just as quickly as he rose, Jaime Johnson seemed to disappear. And that wasn't by accident. Over the past decade, Johnson has slowly removed himself from the public machine of country music. While many fans assumed he was just taking a break, the truth is that Johnson made a deliberate choice to live life on his own terms. He stopped releasing new music, ignored record label pressure, and vanished into the backwoods of Alabama. There, on land he owns outside of Montgomery, he lives a life completely unplugged from the world that once tried to polish his rough edges. No entourage, no publicist, no social media circus, just land, freedom, and quiet. Friends say Johnson lives like a true recluse, often spending his days working on carpentry, raising livestock, writing for himself rather than radio. He's known to occasionally drop by a small honky-tonk unannounced and play an impromptu set or surprise a local festival crowd before disappearing again just as quickly. His few public sightings often come with a thick beard, a worn-out cap, and clothes that say, "I didn't come here to be seen." In 2022, during a rare interview, Johnson confessed that he suffered a concussion years ago that affected his ability to write music the way he once did. But rather than force creativity, he embraced the silence. "I'm not chasing anything," he said. "I'm just living." Today, Jaime Johnson represents something rare in modern country music, a man who walked away when the industry expected him to sell out. Instead of clinging to fame, he clings to authenticity, and in doing so, he's become even more of a legend, one who chose to disappear into the wild by choice, not by necessity. Doug Stone was one of the smoothest voices in 90s country. His emotional ballads like I'd Be Better Off, in a pine box. Too busy being in love, and why didn't I think of that? Soared up the charts and soundtracked the heartbreaks and hopes of a generation. With 8 #1 singles and over 5 million albums sold, Doug was everywhere. On radio, on stage, on award shows. But if you try to find him today, you might come up short. Because somewhere along the way, Doug Stone quietly slipped off the radar. And it turns out that was very much intentional. For years, Stone battled through personal storms behind the scenes, multiple heart attacks, a near-fatal stroke, a plane crash, and ongoing health problems all contributed to his decision to slow down. By the early 2000s, Doug realized the Nashville grind was taking more than it was giving. He stopped chasing hits and instead started chasing peace. And he found it, not in the spotlight, but in a quiet rural stretch of Georgia where he could reconnect with what truly mattered. Today, Doug Stone lives off the grid in a secluded part of Georgia, far from paparazzi, tour buses, or bustling Music Row studios. He raises horses, turns with his family, and keeps to himself. His property is outfitted for self-sufficiency, and many who visited describe it as a peaceful slice of country life, a place where nobody's checking their phones and nobody cares about charts or streams. Doug himself has said he's not interested in being a product anymore. Instead, he plays the occasional show in a small-town venue, releases music when he feels inspired, and lives a life most country fans would envy. He's not gone. He's just chosen a different kind of stage, one where the audience is the open sky, the soundtrack is the wind through the trees, and the only encore he's chasing is a peaceful evening under the stars. For Doug Stone, the fame was never the prize. The real reward was finding a life where he could be fully himself, unplugged, unfiltered, and finally free. Bobby Bare has always been one of country music's most rebellious and underrated legends. With hits like Detroit City, 500 Miles Away from Home, and Marie Laveau, he carved out a gritty, poetic lane that bridged the Nashville sound and outlaw country long before the term became cool. Bare wasn't chasing stardom, he was crafting stories. And even at the height of his fame in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, Bobby seemed more interested in being real than being famous. Now at 89 years old, Bobby Bare has chosen a quiet, disconnected life that reflects the same independent spirit that defined his career. In recent years, he's pulled back from the public eye almost completely. No more tours, no more interviews, and very few appearances, even at events celebrating the old guard of country music. It's not because he's forgotten. Quite the opposite. Bobby Bare's contributions to country music are more appreciated than ever, especially by younger artists who see him as a trailblazer who never sold out. But what shocks most people is just how far off the grid he's gone. Bare is believed to be living on private land in Tennessee, surrounded by nature and very little technology. Sources close to his family say he doesn't even keep a smartphone, just a landline and a wall of books. He still writes songs, but not for radio or charts. They're just for him now, for his own therapy, his own legacy. His retreat isn't out of bitterness, it's out of peace. After losing many of his closest friends in country music and watching the industry morph into something unrecognizable, Bare decided he'd rather live in the past on his own terms than adapt to a present that didn't feel like home anymore. Occasionally, a rare photo or post surfaces from a fan who caught him fishing by a river or attending a local event. But he rarely sticks around long. He's elusive, private, mysterious, just like the songs he once sang. And maybe that's fitting, because Bobby Bare isn't just living off the grid physically. He's off the grid spiritually too, untouched by modern chaos, unfazed by the need to be seen. In a world where celebrities share every moment of their lives online, Bobby Bare reminds us of something rare and beautiful. Sometimes the loudest legacy is built in silence. In the early 1980s, Lacy J Dalton was one of the most recognizable female voices in country music. With a raw, raspy vocal style that set her apart from her peers, Dalton quickly rose through the ranks with hits like "Takin' It Easy," 16th Avenue, and Crazy Blue Eyes. She wasn't trying to fit into the mold of polished Nashville country. She brought a rock-infused energy and lyrical honesty that made her both respected and unforgettable. But as the country music landscape shifted in the late 80s and early 90s, Lacy J Dalton quietly began to disappear from the mainstream spotlight. While many assumed she simply faded out of the business, the truth is more intentional and profound. She chose to leave. She didn't just leave the charts, she left the whole scene behind, trading fame for freedom. Today, at 78 years old, Lacy lives off the grid in the mountains of Nevada, where she has found purpose in a cause that has nothing to do with music: protecting Nevada's wild horses. She co-founded the Let 'Em Run Foundation, which advocates for the preservation of America's wild horse populations. Her days are no longer consumed by studio sessions and tour buses, but by working the land, caring for animals, and raising awareness about a cause most in the music world never saw coming. Dalton still plays the occasional benefit concert or charity event, but she's made it clear that her heart is now in the mountains, not the industry. Her lifestyle is humble. No fancy cars, no glamour, just wide-open spaces, a wood-burning stove, and a guitar she still picks up when the inspiration hits. She documents little online, and fans looking to find her often end up in the nearest town, asking locals if they've seen her riding horseback through the valley. Lacy's off-the-grid existence is more than a personal choice. It's a mission. She's a modern outlaw, not in the country music sense, but in a deeper, wilder way. Her fight for wild horses has given her life a second act, one just as fierce and meaningful as her time in the spotlight. In a world that never stops broadcasting, Lacy J Dalton turned down the volume completely and found something even louder: peace, purpose, and the power of disappearing into the land she loves. In the early 1990s, Doug Supernaw was a rising force in country music with a string of hits that captured both the honky-tonk spirit and heartfelt storytelling the genre was known for. His breakout single, I Don't Call Him Daddy, struck a deep emotional chord with fans, particularly divorced fathers. It topped the charts and turned Supernaw into a household name almost overnight. With his rugged good looks, powerful voice, and Texas authenticity, he seemed destined for a long run at the top. But just as quickly as he ascended, Doug Supernaw began to disappear. A series of personal and professional missteps derailed his momentum: label troubles, injuries, legal issues, and a shifting country music scene that was becoming more polished and pop-oriented. Supernaw, who always walked the line between outlaw and traditionalist, didn't fit in with the new Nashville sound, and he quietly faded from the mainstream. Rather than chasing the limelight, Doug chose to retreat, first into smaller shows, then into near-total privacy. By the 2000s, he was largely off the grid, living in East Texas, performing only sporadically. Fans who sought him out during this period often described finding him in out-of-the-way bars or community centers, playing acoustic sets for local crowds that still remembered every lyric. He didn't maintain a strong online presence. No Instagram, no frequent YouTube uploads, no digital updates about his life. He became something of a ghost in the country music world. Still alive, still playing, but unreachable by the mechanisms of modern fame. And that's the way he seemed to prefer it. Supernaw wasn't interested in viral fame or chart comebacks. He just wanted to play his music on his own terms. Then, in 2019, Doug made headlines again, but for tragic reasons. He announced he had been diagnosed with stage 4 lung and bladder cancer. In a rare public statement, he thanked fans and asked for prayers. Despite his private life, the country community rallied around him, remembering the heartfelt depth he once brought to the genre. Doug Supernaw passed away in November 2020, at the age of 60. Though he died a few years ago, his life in the 2 decades prior, living quietly, far from the spotlight, embracing small-town anonymity, makes him one of the most iconic examples of a country star who truly lived off the grid. He chose his people, his Texas roots, and his quiet life over the chaos of fame. His story serves as both a warning and a testament that not everyone is built for stardom, and sometimes the truest form of peace is found when you walk away from everything that once defined you. Randy Meisner was never your typical country star, and truthfully, he straddled genres more than most. As a founding member of the Eagles, he helped define the country rock hybrid sound that dominated the 1970s and inspired generations of Nashville artists. With his haunting high harmonies on songs like Take It to the Limit, Randy left a permanent stamp on American music. But long after the lights dimmed and the stadiums emptied, Meisner slowly faded from public life, choosing solitude over celebrity. While Meisner's most iconic years were with the Eagles, his ties to the country genre were unmistakable. He began his career playing bass for Rick Nelson's Stone Canyon Band, one of the first groups to truly blend country with rock, and his solo records carried the plaintive storytelling and heartache that define country music at its best. But fame took a toll on Randy Meisner. Known for his quiet personality and discomfort with the pressures of stardom, he famously clashed with other members of the Eagles over the intense touring schedule and spotlight responsibilities. After a particularly bitter dispute during the Hotel California era, Meisner left the band in 1977, walking away from millions of dollars, endless arenas, and the very heights of musical success. He never returned to that level of fame, and he didn't try to. Instead, Randy Meisner disappeared into a world most celebrities rarely choose, a life far away from the press, from social media, from sold-out shows. He stopped giving interviews, rarely made public appearances, and lived quietly in California, battling both health and personal struggles. In his later years, stories occasionally surfaced about his reclusive nature, how even former bandmates couldn't always reach him, and how fans would sometimes spot him living a modest, quiet life that sharply contrasted with his rock star past. His life wasn't without tragedy. Meisner faced profound personal loss and mental health issues, and in his final decade, he was the subject of multiple conservatorship petitions. But through it all, one fact remained clear: he had no desire to return to the spotlight. His music still played on radio stations and filled jukeboxes across America, but Randy himself had vanished into privacy. Though Randy Meisner sadly passed away in 2023 at the age of 77, the last phase of his life qualifies him, without question, as someone who lived off the grid. He didn't chase legacy, didn't seek approval, and didn't profit off nostalgia. He simply stepped away. For an artist who once sang, "Take it to the limit one more time," Randy Meisner chose instead to live within his own quiet boundaries. A man who had already given the world enough. Tom T. Hall earned his nickname the Storyteller for good reason. With songs like Harper Valley PTA, That's How I Got to Memphis, and I Love, Hall painted vivid portraits of everyday people, small-town troubles, and the joys and heartbreaks of rural life. For decades, he was a pillar of classic country music, a songwriter's songwriter whose words shaped the genre's golden era. But in the final stretch of his life, Tom T. Hall did something most stars never do. He disappeared almost entirely, living off the grid in both spirit and practice. After a prolific run throughout the 60s, 70s, and 80s, Hall gradually began to step back from the industry. He gave fewer interviews, appeared at fewer events, and ultimately stopped recording music altogether. He retreated to a sprawling farm outside Franklin, Tennessee, where he and his wife, Dixie Hall, focused on raising animals, writing bluegrass songs, and living a life rooted in simplicity. To many who knew them, their home was less a celebrity compound and more a self-sufficient haven, complete with goats, dogs, and no-nonsense independence. The couple continued writing songs, hundreds in fact, but they shunned the spotlight. They wrote under pseudonyms, donated proceeds to young bluegrass musicians, and built a quiet legacy behind the scenes. Tom T. Hall didn't want the world watching his every move. He wanted peace, reflection, and space to live a life filled with meaning rather than headlines. When Dixie passed away in 2015, Tom withdrew even more. He stopped attending industry events altogether and declined public appearances, awards, and honors, even as the country music world celebrated his influence, including his 2008 induction into the Country Music Hall of Fame. Hall remained distant, watching from the privacy of his front porch, rather than the front row of an awards show. His tragic passing in 2021, ruled a suicide at the age of 85, shocked many and cast a new, somber light on his years of reclusion. But even in death, fans respected his desire for privacy. Tom T. Hall wasn't running from fame. He had simply finished his story. Though no longer living, Hall's final decades make him a defining example of a country star who chose to vanish from the public eye and embrace a quieter, more grounded life. In an age of oversharing, he stood as a reminder that sometimes the most powerful legacy is the one built far from the spotlight. Tom T. Hall didn't just write stories. He became one, and the ending, while sad, was unmistakably his. Bobbie Gentry remains one of country music's most haunting mysteries, not because of a scandal or a downfall, but because she simply chose to vanish. Best known for her 1967 smash hit Ode to Billie Joe, Gentry captured the attention of an entire generation with her smoky voice, Southern Gothic storytelling, and magnetic stage presence. For a while, she was everywhere. Television specials, Las Vegas residencies, chart-topping duets with Glenn Campbell. But then, one day in the early 1980s, she walked away. Not with a bang, not with a farewell tour, just silence. Born Roberta Lee Streeter in Mississippi, Bobbie Gentry was always a little different from her peers. She was highly intelligent, deeply private, and fiercely independent. She wrote and produced much of her own music, rare for a female artist in the 60s, and she controlled much of her career from behind the curtain. When she released Ode to Billie Joe, it wasn't just the mysterious story of a boy jumping off a bridge that captivated people. It was the woman behind the voice, shrouded in just as much mystery as her lyrics. By the early 80s, after years of performing in Vegas and releasing successful albums, Gentry simply disappeared from the public eye. She stopped recording, stopped performing. No interviews, no TV specials, no tabloid headlines. She didn't spiral out of control. She walked out of the room, and she never looked back. Today, Bobbie Gentry is believed to be living somewhere near Memphis, Tennessee, possibly under a different name. She has declined every interview request and reunion invitation, even as tributes and documentaries have tried to lure her back into the spotlight. Former colleagues describe her as happy, healthy, and content, simply uninterested in fame or public attention. And in many ways, that has only added to her legend. She's become an icon of privacy, a master of self-erasure in a world where every celebrity moment is captured, documented, and monetized. Bobbie Gentry's greatest performance might not have been on stage, but in her stunning ability to disappear without a trace and still be talked about 4 decades later. In a culture obsessed with comebacks, Bobbie Gentry's refusal to return has become her final act. Not tragic, but triumphant in its refusal to conform. She's not hiding, she's just done. And for some, that's the most powerful statement an artist can make. Travis Trit once stood tall among the country greats of the 1990s, an outlaw in spirit, a powerhouse in voice, and a rebel who brought Southern rock swagger to Nashville's polished charts. With hits like Here's a Quarter, Call Someone Who Cares, Anymore, and Trouble, Trit carved out a legacy that fused honky-tonk grit with rock and roll fire. But as the years rolled on and the music industry shifted, Travis quietly began stepping back, distancing himself from the spotlight. And today, at 61, he's one of the few modern legends who've embraced something like an off-the-grid life, far from paparazzi, tour buses, and screaming crowds. Trit now resides on a sprawling estate in rural Georgia, where he enjoys hunting, fishing, and raising horses. His home is more than a retreat. It's a deliberate sanctuary built around privacy, family, and peace. While he's not entirely vanished, he still makes select appearances, does occasional shows, and is active on social media. His overall presence has become subdued. He's not chasing fame anymore. He's letting it come to him when, and if, he wants it. What separates Trit from others on this list is that his retreat wasn't fueled by scandal or burnout. It was intentional. He's spoken openly about his disillusionment with the modern music industry, particularly the changing sound of country radio and the commercialization of the genre he once helped define. Rather than adapt to trends he didn't believe in, he chose something rarer: authenticity and silence. In interviews, he's admitted that the quiet life has allowed him to reconnect with what matters most: his family, his land, his beliefs, and his roots. In many ways, Travis Trit represents a bridge between the old-school outlaw mentality and the modern freedom to unplug. He didn't have to vanish completely like Bobby Gentry or live in total isolation like Jaime Johnson, but he did reclaim his life on his terms. From elusive legends like Bobby Gentry to modern-day rebels like Travis Trit, these artists prove that off the grid doesn't always mean lost. Sometimes it's a return to self, a rejection of noise, a choice to live freely, quietly, and intentionally. In a world where visibility is often equated with value, these stars remind us that retreat can be a powerful act of rebellion. And sometimes, the best stories happen after the stage goes dark. Let us know in the comments, which country star's off-the-grid lifestyle surprised you the most? And would you walk away from the spotlight too, if you had the chance?